worth
It is
keeping our eye
6
on
o'clock,
things.
and
Let's talk more about that.
in order to be respectful of our guests, we're going to get started on time here for our town board work session for June 24th at 6 p.m. Goal of the work session is to have the town board receive information on topics of town business. And this evening, we have our first guest. I'm going to invite you to come down here. You want to come down here? Bright Futures presentation discussion from Miss Sarah Rice. So,
All right.
Sarah, would it be helpful to you if we went around the room and introduced ourselves to you?
Sure, that would be great.
So we'll start here.
Tom Jones, Town Board.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Ken.
Paul Rennemeyer.
Still Shane, how are you?
Barry Wilson, Town Board.
Miles Baker, Town Board.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
They can get away with it. Why can't
Well, I know Ken.
He's on the board.
Ken's royalty, you're
David.
Yeah.
David.
David.
And then, how about back there?
Yeah.
So there's name by the end of the
Director.
Okay.
Wilson, the lens manager.
Ian McCarter, town attorney.
And Kim Evil, the other town attorney.
The other.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
And with that, we're gonna let Sarah give us a
All right.
presentation on Bright Futures.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to come to one of your work sessions and really fill you in a little bit more about what Bright Futures is and kind of where we're going. For those of you that don't know, Ken sits on our board of directors, and so we are really fortunate to have him a part of Bright Futures as well. And I've talked to Christy a little bit here and there, and you know, was kind of picking her brain about when's a good time for me to come in, and we thought a work session would be a really good idea. So, I'm gonna assume that a lot of you know about Bright Futures, so I won't go into too far in depth unless you have questions. So along my presentation, if you guys do have questions, please feel free to raise your hand or just blurt it out and we can go from there, okay? So Bright Futures was formed in 2016 by the Weld County Commissioners as a workforce development program for Weld County. What we serve and what we do today is we have been focused on grants to any Weld County resident who graduates high school, gets their GED, or is an honorably discharged veteran. They are eligible when they apply for Bright Futures to receive up to $2,000 per year to go to college or any accredited certification of their choice in Colorado and the surrounding states. So far today, and this number is actually a little bit higher, we have served over 3,500 students have received a Bright Futures grant since 2016. 298 of those are from Windsor. That equals over $1 million that Bright Futures has given back to your high school students, GED recipients, or honorably discharged veterans. I put that number in there because it's pretty impressive. When I received the data, when I was looking at, you know, where do the students live, where are they going to school, where's their residency, to see that out of a little under 300 students received $1 million from Bright Futures, I'm really proud that that happened right here in your community. Now, I don't have those updated numbers actually with the kiddos that just graduated. So they're applying, and their date to apply for Bright Futures is June 30. So that number here in Windsor will hopefully go up. I also want that number to go up for Windsor because I feel like it's low. You guys have a lot more students that are graduating high school. So I have met with your superintendent and the counselors to see how can we get more involved in the schools, including Severance also, to get the word out about Bright Futures and that it's available for their students. If you don't know, the Weld County Commissioners have designated up to $3 million for the next 4 years to go directly into the grant program. What that means for me right now, selfishly, means every fundraising dollar that I fundraise goes directly toward the grant program, which is pretty amazing. So it goes directly towards students. So whether that's business support, individual support, or municipality support, all of that money is going back to the students.
Sarah,
Yes?
you said 2,000, is it per year? Will it follow them?
It is. They do have to apply. They don't have to apply. Let me say it again. They have to meet some guidelines every year to get the money again. And basically what that is just do 16 hours of community service per year in order to keep it. And keep a 2.0 grade point average in college. So it's pretty easy. Yeah.
And so if we had a veteran who came back to Windsor and he had a bachelor's degree, could they go for a master's? I mean, are there caps on this?
That's a good question, and I think the answer would be no, I don't think there is a cap, but that's a really good question, especially with the veteran population. I have been in this role since January, so a little bit less than 6 months, and so that is a question that I will talk about. And Ken, we have our board
Yeah.
meeting tomorrow, so maybe we should just circle back with them.
Right,
That's a great
My
question.
next question is, does it have to be a degree seeking kind of thing? If a high school student said, well, I don't wanna go to college, but I wanna learn to speak French, I mean, could you get tuition assistance for anything?
No, it does need to be degree seeking, but with the caveat of it could be an accredited certification. So if they say, gosh, I wanna go into welding, but I can only take a few classes here and there because I am working, we will pay for that as long as they are on a track
Okay.
to receive a degree or a certification. So if that French class then turned into some sort of degree, if they're like, this is the degree I wanna go into, and that's one of the the class requirements, then absolutely it would cover that. Yeah. So, 2 things that changed to our program just in 2018, was community service hours is now 16 hours per year in order for a student to be eligible and continue to get the grant. And our geographic area shrank. When it was launched, a student could go anywhere in the United States to college. And because we are workforce development, the board and the commissioners quickly realized like, oh boy, we better make sure that they're closer to home in order to make sure that they're gonna get a job here in Weld County.
So what is the geographic area? Is it just college?
Colorado and the surrounding states. Volunteerism in Windsor with your students has been huge. Now, this number is lower because on this humongous spreadsheet that I have, the only way I could come up with 3,669 hours of your students volunteering in Windsor was if the nonprofit had the word Windsor in it. There are nonprofits here that I don't know all of their names yet, and so I guarantee you there are nonprofits on that list that I am missing. But what you can see, where your students are volunteering in order to qualify for Bright Futures, they're volunteering the town of Windsor, they're volunteering with the rec department, the library, at their own school, like 4 or 5 different churches that they're involved in. And again, that was just in 2018, and I know that number is bigger. I will get to know your nonprofits better because I'm also reaching out to the nonprofit community just to make sure that, hey, if our students call you to volunteer, is it okay that they come in? So I will get to know your community better when it comes to nonprofits, but I thought this was pretty awesome to share with you today. Bright Future students as a whole in 2018 volunteered over 42,000 hours. Education was the number 1 because a lot of times they can volunteer in their school. And so these are seniors we're talking about for the most part. And they are volunteering everywhere between cities and libraries, other nonprofits, police and fire, and education.
Sir,
Yeah.
I know sometimes like through honors programs, they have a volunteer requirement. Can students double dip? Can they volunteer an hour for an honors class and count it towards this?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. As long as they are volunteering their time, on the Bright Futures form, it's pretty easy. It's, where did you volunteer, how many hours, and you have somebody sign the form. I don't necessarily think that I want to institute maybe them having to do separate. If they're already volunteering, I'd like to honor that for them.
Yeah, I just wanted to see how
Yeah.
flexible that was. That's great.
I mean, that's a good question. I haven't really brought it up to the board, to be honest. We haven't really talked about that. But I'm flexible, so I would sign off on that for sure. Anyone else have questions about volunteering? Okay. This is kind of a big slide, and I know that I'm breaking all the rules. You're not supposed to put this many words on one slide, but I thought this was important for you guys to see. 289 certificates and 300 degrees have been awarded to Bright Future students at Ames College. That number's more because they did just graduate and I still don't have those numbers from the schools, so that number is growing. And what's really interesting, and as a municipality, you might want to take note of just some of these things that the students are going to school for. Welding, fire science, nurse's aid, automotive, EMTs, engineering, things that I'm sure you would be like, oh gosh, wouldn't that be great if we could get some of those students to come work for the city of Windsor. Degrees earned are anywhere from, Associates of Arts, liberal arts degree, business is really big, fire science is a big one as well, medical, auto, things like that. At UNC, over the course since 2016, we've had 617 students go to UNC. We just had our first Bright Futures class graduate, and I am trying to get a hold of those students to kind of get their testimony and their story of their 4 years of Bright Futures journey, because this is the very first class that's graduated. But in here also, it kind of runs the gamut. But what I'm hoping to do is really drill down into some of these degrees and really find out, how many fire and science degrees are we having versus like a business degree. And ultimately, I'm trying to institute some sort of data collection to where Bright Futures can go back to the community and say, this is where they're working. Because I hope to say they're working in Weld County. I'm not gonna keep them all, but I'd like to keep as many as possible. So our goals at the very minimum this coming school year, the school year as a whole, so the school year 18-19 and then the school year of 2019-2020. We want to distribute a minimum of 1,500 grants to the students that are eligible. We want to continue to develop and enhance partnerships with local businesses and with a strong focus on workforce development. Provide support to the school districts, local colleges, and universities to make sure that the students are successful and that they're not dropping out. So what can Bright Futures do to continue that support? And fundraise. That's in big fat letters up there because I really need to fundraise a lot of money because ultimately I would love to be able to go to the commissioners here in a few years and say, thank you for your contribution to Bright Futures of that up to $3 million, but we don't need it anymore because we now have all these business partners joining us, municipalities joining us, and we're able to provide this on our own. So more to come on that. Engagement is just speaking with you today. I really appreciate being here and engaging with you, engaging with schools, the business community, especially here in Windsor. I have been meeting some of your businesses, which has been really fun, actually. Your economic development department, Stacy and Jill, have started to plug me into the business community here. So if there is somebody that you think, gosh, Sarah should really talk to so-and-so or meet so-and-so, I am always available for a meeting, and because I'm trying to get the word out about Bright Futures as much as I can. With my last couple minutes, I do want to share with you that I did apply for a grant from United Way Weld County to receive 2 AmeriCorps Vistas to come into Bright Futures to help us develop our workforce part of our program. We were developed for workforce development, and I'm the very first executive director, really first full-time employee that they've hired. So nobody's been really focused on the workforce piece. It's been, how do we set up the students for success, which is great. But now we need to move into the workforce. And so I am hopefully going to create a workforce development program. And so I'll have a Vista helping me work with the school districts and the students directly, because we know that there's 2 types of high school students, ones that want to go to school, college, and ones that don't. The ones that don't, how can we bring them into the Bright Future system and still introduce them to the business community, give them those direct connections, and also those manufacturers and agriculture that want to hire right out of high school, let's connect our business investors to them directly. And support the schools with all the amazing things that they're doing. The other AmeriCorps Vista will help me work with the college students. So same kind of concept, but maybe on a more direct level. So if you have a bunch of business college students that are going to UNC Montfort Business College, I want to be able to take them quarterly, twice a year, however we decide to do this, and take them out and give them a tour of OI and Vestas and have them meet with a banker if they're interested in accounting, and really broker that relationship to the business community and the business community to the students. So when they graduate, they either know exactly where they want to work, or maybe they've already applied for a job and they'll just walk into a job once they graduate. So the first year of this program will be a lot of research and development. Myself and the Vistas, we will really be engaging with communities, engaging with businesses, municipalities to see how we can grow this program together, because I'm a community developer for sure, and I do know that this program has to have support of everybody in order for our students to be successful. And ultimately, we have that workforce pipeline coming right here into Weld County. So with that, do you have any questions for me? Yes, sir.
And I might have missed this in your presentation, but do they make a commitment to come to Weld County to work for X number of?
They do not.
They don't?
Nope.
So they can go anywhere?
They can go anywhere.
But we're hoping certainly that
Yep.
they return here.
Yep, which is why I need to really develop this program to be seamless, so the students don't even think about leaving. They're like, oh, well, I'm gonna go work here. I'm gonna go to Banner Health, or I'm gonna go to Vestas, or wherever they're gonna go. So, yeah. Yes.
Do you have your own application process, or do you just use the school district's kind of standard?
We do have our own application process, yep. It's right on our website, it's called eScholarship. And the students go online to apply, and then as long as they meet the requirements, they will be awarded, again, up to $2,000. That all depends on tuition and fees, because we are last dollar in, and so we'll pay a chunk of tuition and fees.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the tax incentive
Sure.
for homeowners to
Yeah.
participate? Because I know a lot of folks get this notice in their bill, but I think there's some confusion about the opportunity for them, even if they're not going to apply for Bright Futures or aren't interested in necessarily thinking about helping kids. There's a way that you can even benefit just being a property owner.
Okay, yeah,
correct?
perfect, yes, thank you, Mayor, for mentioning that, because it is complicated, you guys, when you start talking about taxes, even myself, I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm trying to come out with a really good way to talk about this so it makes sense to people, but it boils down to if you own property in Weld County, so that is a resident or a business, you can donate back to Bright Futures via your Weld County property tax and receive 50% back from your tax. If you're familiar with the child care tax credit, it's very similar to that. The child care tax credit everybody knows about, and they talk about it really well, so I should probably steal some of their verbiage. But it works very similarly, but with your Weld County property tax specifically, and that is because when the commissioners changed legislation at the state, they had to say, well, we're developing this nonprofit that is workforce development only. And that's exactly what we are. And therefore, they could set aside money to reimburse taxpayers if they donate to this workforce development program. So if you if you owe $1,000 on your property tax and you decide to donate $500 to Bright Futures, you would get $250 back on that $500 donation.
Is that the same year of the donation, or is it in arrears the next year? I can't remember.
It's either or, because the treasurer's office is very
Depends when you pay
flexible. Yep, it's very flexible on how you pay. They will sit down with you and figure that out. Now, what I was able to leverage and what the business community has been leveraging since 2016, who are really aware of this, they're doing the same thing. So if they have 10 properties, they can get X amount of money back. So it's not like if you give us $10,000 as a business, you're going to get $5,000 back. It depends on your mill levy and all sorts of other business stuff that gets complicated. But I was able to leverage that with Envirotech. Envirotech is a new business partner with Bright Futures, and it's pretty awesome because they were able to give their donation to Bright Futures and get that tax incentive. And also, they then can put that same tax incentive on their federal taxes and their state taxes. So at the end of the day, they are paying, less than 50% out of pocket once they get all of their reimbursements back to them. So it's a big, important piece.
The child care works as a credit, so it's on the year of your return. It'll just be an off-the-top credit for 50% of your contribution.
And so this would just apply to the Weld County portion, right? So it wouldn't be your school, fire district, so you'd really have to go through and boil into your Weld County tax bill?
Yep.
And then is a cap 50% of your total bill? So if you owed 1,000, can you contribute more than 500? Or how does that work?
You can. You can contribute more,
You
but
can-
you only get
As much as you
50%
want.
back on that
You can
tax bill.
contribute your full tax amount.
You could? So if your tax
Yeah,
amount was
if you want to.
1,000, you could contribute 2,000 and get $1,000 credit
Yes.
from Weld? Okay. Wow.
And I think
That's a better way to explain it.
it's on your state.
That's what I've done, is I've paid my tax double,
Yep,
but in the end,
yep,
I get a
you're gonna get it
rebate.
back. And then we keep the double, which is pretty awesome. And you can still file that on your federal and your state taxes. Federal, depending on if you standardize or not, and again, that gets complicated, but you can then take it into 2 other places and get even more reimbursed. So I am trying to find a better way to really promote that within residents, because if they are passionate about our program and they do want to support students and workforce, this is a really great way to do that to build up the community. Yes.
I'm sorry, let me ask one more. So let's say it's $1,000 to Weld County. Could you write out a check for $10,000 and get future year credit against future tax bills? Or is it
That's a
all-
really good question, and I bet you could if you talk to Weld County Treasurer. The reason I say that is because when I talked to Renee, she's the assistant treasurer, When I went to her with Envirotech and I said, will you create this beautiful spreadsheet that she has showing all of this? They had already paid half of their taxes, but they still needed to pay the other half. She said that she can do some moving forward, she can do some in the rears. It depends on what they can do, but they are very flexible when it comes to that.
Okay.
Yes.
And I was asking for these guys, I'm not there.
I was thinking,
That's what I wanted to say, if I donated it, if I
Ken's
donated
writing it down,
10,000.
Ken's like, we need to call him for a follow-up meeting.
Like,
Yeah, and
donate $1 million.
And so I'll leave with you guys today. Again, thank you for having me be here. If you have any business partners that you think I should meet, I would absolutely love that introduction. And also I'd love to partner with the town of Windsor. And so if you guys start thinking about your workforce development here and how Bright Futures can help support you in that effort and help meet your goals, I would absolutely love to open up that conversation, because right now with Bright Futures, the sky is the limit to where we can really take this program. And so if I need to take the program one direction because it's gonna support municipalities in order to support workforce, then why not? Let's look at it and let's talk about it together.
Do you have a card you can leave
I do.
with all of us?
I do.
Or-
And then I have that as well, my email, but then, yeah, Chris, let me get some.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just gonna put this up here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
thank you, Sarah.
Okay, Miss Sarah's getting her cards. Wade is coming up and gonna, I think, get us another presentation so we can see the open space and trail strategic plan update.
I can just pass them down.
Yeah, I hope I have enough. Go this way, go that way.
Ken doesn't even.
Ken does not need one. He knows exactly where I'm
I know where
at.
she is.
Yeah, you guys, that's all I have. I have more in the car if you guys need
Okay.
another card.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Enjoy
Thank
your evening. Nice to meet you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Hopefully all of you have had a chance to kind of look through some of these slides. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. This is kind of, we broke away my position under Parks in early 2018, so this is what I've been working on. These are the guiding documents that I've been using for my objectives. This is generally the overall area that I manage. It's about 440 acres, 22 different sites, and about 30 miles of trails. Since we completed the Trails Master Plan in 2015, this is kind of a quick breakdown summary of what we've completed or what's in process right now. Probably most importantly, the connection we're working on is the Kiger River Bluffs to 17th Street. We're feeling pretty optimistic that our GOCO grant application that we've been invited to submit with Larimer County, Timnath, and Fort Collins is hopefully going to be successful. This is going to create a major connection from Windsor to the Poudre Trail, and we anticipate within the next 3 to 5 years the Poudre Trail will be completed all the way into Fort Collins.
When do you anticipate hearing from that? Or
It'll
when
be
are they
September.
supposed to? In September.
Yeah, great question. It'll be in September. And the construction, so we do have funds budgeted for construction of the trail from all around Kiger up to River Bluffs. I'm trying to schedule that strategically around when we receive word of that award, and we have to coordinate that pretty carefully so we can still be eligible for funding. We can't do work, in advance of being notified of the funding. I'm still looking for clarification as to whether we have to be fully under contract before we start moving any dirt or doing any work, but.
So this is part of the grant? So this is part of-
Yes.
oh, okay. And how much did we budget for this?
That was $1 million.
Yeah, it's $1 million.
And so now we would be at 20% of the trail for a match? Is that right?
Approximately,
Yeah,
yeah.
20-25%.
Yeah,
So it's worth waiting.
yeah, definitely.
200,000? Did you say 20 or 25?
Around there.
It's
About
probably,
200,000.
Yeah, it's in nuance a little bit because Fort Collins, it's our percentage of the overall project, and Fort Collins, Timnath, and Larimer County are all modifying a little bit their scopes of work.
So we're not paying $1 million ourselves, that's being shared between all these entities?
No, we budgeted for this year $1 million.
so we budgeted to do our trail section, $1 million to do that. But when this opportunity came up with GOCO, we met and said, well, God, if we can get a 75% match on this money, let's kind of hold off. Let's not do this project this spring.
Right.
Let's kind of bet on the come in the fall, especially just given all the parties involved in this, the visibility of the Poudre River Trail. I think there's this is going to be a popular project with the GOCO board. So we thought it was a worthy bet to punt it.
But the 700, the match would be split between the partners. So ours should be about 200.
Yeah, it'll be significantly less than what we budgeted to be worth.
Right.
Yep. And we'll get, once we actually, everything comes together, we're happy to come back to the board and say this is how much it actually costs,
Great.
but it'll be less.
And just to go back, and then we do anticipate submitting a request for completing the rest of the what we call it the number 2 ditch trail, because that was the original alignment, but we're currently working through the easement acquisitions for the properties along 392, so we're anticipating construction of that in 2020. As far as open lands, we've acquired 2 major pieces of property, the Kyger Reservoir and the Kodak properties. They make up 300 acres, which is the lion's share of that 400 acres. Yes, sir.
In the slide, you talk about this as a treated area. Some of these are treated areas on this map. You have a
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's just a little note that helps me to track areas that we actually would manage, or like if I were to contract out services, the areas that are not highlighted are the fields that we lease that out to a farmer. So, but we're still responsible for all the way down to the bottom of the slide and all the way along 257.
And on this slide, you might want to mention where the farmed areas are, or ultimately where the if the road decides to gravel mine, that's where they'll be.
Yeah, so it's these 3 little areas are where they farm. The areas that are not are where either ditches run or, they can't get water to them.
And I'm sorry, you said who's gonna gravel mine?
So Road donated that land 2 years ago. They had it back then started the clock. They have 10 years to complete mining. They're 2 years in.
So they gave us land but reserved the right to mine.
Right.
In specific locations.
Right. And then,
They were gonna charge us for it.
a big portion of tonight's discussion is to talk about strategic plan as it relates to the open lands and trails. So this is just a quick summary highlighting all of those areas that specifically relate. And this is what we have done with that. So I've taken all of that information, Eric and I have taken all of that information, we've plugged it into this spreadsheet to create a roadmap for ourselves of all the steps that we need to complete, all the objectives, and I'm so sorry, I'm supposed to hand this out. So the intent of this is not to get way in depth, kind of pass that out, but into the details, but it's really just to show that we're looking ahead, we're trying to create basically an umbrella of steps of what we want to accomplish. And your strategic planning consultant, I think stated it best, like this really is a succession plan in many ways. If I drop off the face of the earth tomorrow, if Eric drops off the face of the earth, there's still a document here that helps people know where to go next. So if we get crushed by the whippet.
Popping up.
Yeah, I'll get a beer for that one. Attitude Express. Lucky Trader.
So I've plugged, every single one of the strategic goals that apply to this division and created a matrix very similar to this. It's a work in progress. I envision it being a very dynamic document. And one of the limitations of Excel is you're kind of limited by the rows, but I would imagine we get to a point where it really starts to spider even from these individual cells, and we're trying to figure out what our next steps are and what our objectives look like. So, specifically related to the strategic goals, strategic plan, we also, as you all know, are working on the Transportation Master Plan and the Park Rec and Culture Strategic Plan, and we're anticipating that's going to provide some strong guidance from the community as to what exactly they want to see and further how they would like to fund it. The fee structure, acquisition of easements along the number 2, we're currently working on that. connectivity areas between the west and County Road 13. Harmony Ridge, Radiance, we anticipate those are gonna be high areas of need for non-motorized transportation. And, Highway 257 is a major barrier. Those are the ones we have identified. We're currently,
Before you move on, the number 2 ditch was on there. So I had mentioned to you, and I don't know if that had gone anywhere, about a citizen who had a concern and wanted to see if there could be some kind of a cleanup. Is that, maybe this fall, is that something that you
Yeah,
think is
absolutely.
possible?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And we've spoken about doing that twice a year, starting with.
Oh, great.
It's,
Okay.
it was actually, just to share kind of a neat story, I was out on the trail this winter and I ran into an individual. He refused to take credit for what he's doing, but he has been working that section behind the recreation center and pulling stuff, like he was literally down in the ditch with a sawzall, trying to cut up some pipe and pull it out of there, so.
Who owns that ditch? Greeley, right?
Well, it's the New Cash Ditch
New
Company.
Cash, okay. So can we go in it? Can we go
Well,
in it?
and those are the questions, so the mayor did mention that, and
Right.
we think we would need to get permission from New Cash to do
No.
that.
No, we actually don't.
We don't
Our
have to have
agreement
permission
to
do
get
it.
that trail easement was that we are responsible for maintaining the cross-section of that
Oh,
trail.
okay.
Good. That's
So,
So that won't be, we could plan that, we can,
right,
we have to work around, when the water's running through.
Right,
obviously.
yeah,
We have a board game. all
But we
that.
can manage that on our time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cut up some pipe if they were going.
Yeah.
Maybe scroll ahead back.
oh, okay. As you all know, we're currently we're really just waiting here from Parks and Wildlife. They are very anxious to convey the property to us, but they also are anxious to resolve all the outstanding issues, some of which include the Thornton pipeline. They're working out negotiations with that. And then one of the agreements that comes with the overall easement is each of those properties is supposed to provide trail access around the pond. So they're working with Surfer right now to get trail around that reservoir on the southwest corner of 13 and 392. And then one of the other strategic goals is to acquire I feel like this is a limited view, but we originally received about 20 years ago the Poudre Trail easement, or it's not an easement, it's actually a lease. There's 10 years left on the life of that. We're trying to approach this from a very different perspective, because I think the Poudre Trail Board, and I think the town has acknowledged that we want more than just this ribbon of concrete. We really want that greenway concept, and how can we help protect and preserve that. And so late last year, I applied for a transportation alternatives grant. We were successful in getting that, so that's going to be $544,000 to reconstruct this trail, and that'll address these issues where we have failing banks. It keeps us from going in and doing the hardening of the river banks, because ultimately, in one way or another, that's kind of like the Californication channels, and I don't think that's what we want to see. So we're going to try to get the trail away from the river, and then that opens us up for other opportunities, like acquiring a riverway easement. So this is a concept that our consultants, OTAC or Stillwater Sciences, created for us, and it's really for us to take to those landowners, and because we've had this initial conversation with Great Western Oil and Gas, which is synonymous with Bro, about would you be willing to give us a riverway easement? And their biggest question was, what does that look like? And so our consultant was able to put this together, this graphic together, and we have acreages, kind of the total areas, but the different colors or shading references the different levels of benefit. So one level is just good for floodway, one becomes better for habitat, and it increases, and it allows us to be able to go to those property owners and say, this is specifically what we're talking about. Would you have a willingness to either give us an easement or even a dedication of the property? And I'm glad that the Bro donation was brought up, because I think that's the low-hanging fruit, is if we had the potential to acquire these properties, we could open it up to, you can still retain those rights. If you had your heart set on mining these areas, we can still say, go ahead and retain that right. We're not going to prevent that, but we think it puts us in a better position to be a benefit to the river as opposed to this happening through development. And I think our fear becomes it gets really hardened and they really try to constrain the river, which ultimately isn't good long-term.
How many miles in total are you thinking you want to realign? Because it's not the whole trail.
Of the Poudre Trail?
Do you know
We've
what that
identified,
percentage or number is?
yeah, I apologize, I don't know. I think it's approximately a mile that we identified through the Transportation Alternatives Grant. We haven't looked at the entire trail. There's potential that there's some other areas, and let me show. So this is another example of another project that I've been working on, and this is the Lower Poudre River Recovery and Resilience Master Plan. I apologize, I had to look at that, but it's a mouthful. But that's that presentation that was done, I think it was about 1.5 years ago. Jen Kavexis, who is with the Poudre River Watershed, presented this, and this is a grant-funded project where they looked at the entire river from I-25 all the way to the confluence east of Greeley. And it's really this concept of how can we make the river the most healthy and resilient. And the most real world example of this, and some of you have had the opportunity to see this, is River Bluffs. That is exactly what they have accomplished there. One of the neatest things I think about River Bluffs, aside from all the environmental and conservation efforts, is how the way they designed that was to help us downstream so we got less sedimentation at County Road 13. And you take that concept and you carry it through the entire river, it benefits the entire watershed. And so there may, this is a master plan level, so there could potentially be other areas that they identify, hey, it would be really helpful if we could realign the trail, but all of those have not been identified to date.
I think it was that outfit that presented at Water Leaders. We toured some of the upstream improvements that they've done. Pretty impressive. I mean, they have a bunch of data and studies behind it.
Okay.
Very impressive.
I won't talk a lot about the Eastman South Master Plan. This will be another project that we'll be presenting as a part of our budget discussions, but we do have this great opportunity to partner with Northern NISP, and they're looking at paying a large portion of the project, up to approximately half of it. So, and this concept is not only the restoration of the south side, mitigation efforts for the NISP, creating a riparian area, a river walk. It's going to potentially improve parking at Eastman Park, which is an issue with all the programming that's there. It'll improve recreation, and it's I have long felt that very few people acknowledge that we have this beautiful asset and resource that we can engage with and learn about, and to the deficit of our kids. And I think this facility is going to create a great opportunity where we can get the community down there and they can get a much better understanding of the environment and stewardship and so on and so forth.
So in a way, this would be a little bit reminiscent, at least for a section, of what Larimer County's doing over by 13, right? It'd be kind of a similar concept.
Very similar, yeah.
Similar but usable, because that section of Larimer County won't be open to the public.
Right.
Is the NISP funding conditioned on getting the record of decision, or?
So we are currently in negotiations on an IGA. I don't remember seeing that language in there. I will get that to Ian and Kim to review here soon, but yes. I would say if the project's not gonna go forward, I don't think they're gonna give us any money for it, so.
I've got a question. I'd like to get these grants straightened out. This grant this would be for the portion around Kiger, mainly Windsor's connection to the Poudre Trail.
Correct.
We're on our own with that, aren't we? I mean, as far as match. If we get that grant, Windsor pays the match. Fort Collins and Larimer, would they be involved in that at all or not?
The grant is, so it's called I believe it's called the Connect Initiative by GOCO. And so this is all of us going in together, partnering on this grant. And so each entity is bringing a portion or a match to the overall grant, and we all have the opportunity to get a portion of the grant award.
So Tom, put it another way, we're not parsing out Windsor sections, Timnath section, it's just everything's going into this grant, and we're all paying a percentage of that.
Okay, but this doesn't include the Timnath section of the Pooter Trail as well, does it? The completion of the,
It will include that section of construction, that is part of what the grant will
that's part
fund.
of
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Yeah,
But when you look at it just from, so we had $1 million that we plan to spend on our trail. We think that with Windsor's match, it'll be closer to about $200,000. And a 20% match on 1 million. So if you just look at it in that sense, we're paying certainly a fair share. We're not overpaying, even if it includes other portions of trail. Does that make sense to you? Does that analogy make sense?
Well, you know, we're talking down the road about whatever's left to connect through Timnath to the Fort Collins portion of the Pooter Trail. But that's included in this, or that's separate? I mean, there's millions, I'm sure, involved in that.
so if I understand you correctly, so our $1 million is only paying for Kiger to River Bluffs.
Okay,
And then Timnath and Lerner County are bringing their own money to pay for from north of Kiger
okay.
through Timnath, and Fort Collins is bringing their own money from I-25 into Fort Collins. And so
It's all
everybody's
glommed
bringing,
together in one grant.
exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
And the other question is, we get part of that Larimer County open space tax.
Correct.
What does that generate a year?
I'll have to defer to Eric on that.
100,000.
100,000, no, it's about 165,000
$1,000?
a year.
Not a huge number.
Right, I think we will probably see a bump in 2020 at some point, maybe the 21 budget, because of the census is based on population.
Okay, thanks.
Wait, I have a question about the connectivity of that new trail that goes through Timnath and comes on the east side of that pit north of Kiger.
Mhm.
And it seems to hit our property
Mhm.
right in the middle. It doesn't connect to River Bluffs
Mhm.
parking. How, we got a crosswalk there? How are we gonna address that?
That hasn't been fully designed, but I would imagine there will be some sort of a crosswalk or
Okay.
crossing at that point.
And then they cross and then still would park at River Bluffs?
You're correct. And Kiger will have its own parking lot as well,
Oh, it will?
yes,
So like that gate will come down and,
Mhm.
yep.
yes.
When you talk,
Go ahead, please go ahead.
when you talk about the southeastern park property, I mean, that's, when the river comes up, it's one of the first things to flood.
Mhm.
And that would all be in the plans, that would all be
Yeah.
taken care of?
Yeah, this whole entire area is benched. So right now, there's a large dike all the way along here to help prevent the water from coming in there, and we all know that has blown out. And so this concept is that it's all benched, so that at different flood levels, it helps different vegetation grow. And so it'll be terraced all the way up.
Okay.
But also, like Eric mentioned earlier, for 11 months a year or better, it'll be completely usable. It'll just be a lot more pleasant experience. I think how we interact with the river. I think, just walking the river right now, there's so many places where you know it's there, but you don't see it with all the overgrowth and everything. So I think that this is, that was another part of this Port strategic plan. I think really identifying how do we open up access to the Pooter River? How do we take advantage of having this great river that flows right through town? So this is all kind of on that, same vein.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. On your slide about, first of all, I appreciate all this, it's really good. The slide on roads and traffic, it talks about CDOT 392, 257. My question is, how does this slide relate to the master transportation plan that we're doing?
Or how does it relate to the plan, Parks and Trails plan?
Sorry, can I ask your question again?
Yeah, okay. I saw this slide, and Parks and Rec Trails is talking about roads and traffic, which is good. But my question is, how is what they're talking about here relate to the master transportation plan that we're doing?
TNP.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we should know what page is it,
12 of 24,
The one that's highlighted?
the multimodal transportation plan?
road says roads
It's
and
roads and
traffic.
traffic.
Right.
It's on the screen too.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's right there. So yeah, you don't have to go into detail, I'm just looking to see if we, left hand, right hand's working together, basically. and how
So,
those are fitting together.
I've highlighted the ones that
Okay.
are applicable to us, so the only
Okay.
one on that slide that applies uplands and trails is the transportation master plan effort,
Okay,
or the multimodal.
but you guys are participating in that, right? 'Cause
Absolutely,
it's-
yeah.
so it's Trails and bikes and, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I kind of had the same,
Did you?
it seemed like a non sequitur, I wasn't sure how that
oh,
slide.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Miles?
I have a question since we have a few minutes. The first item here, the Highland Areas connection, it says it's on hold and definitely put on hold. So when my neighbors ask, do I just tell them, we're not looking at it? Are we looking at alternatives? Are we coming up with a plan?
So I think what you're gonna see in this next budget is we all know that that connection was a very expensive connection. And
Yes.
so you're gonna, because we know we don't have the funding to do it in one fell swoop, we've figured out a plan to begin to solve the problem in chunks. So to give you a little prelude, you're probably gonna see from 13, kind of the intersection of 13 and 392. Again, Wade mentioned the Frank State. If we can get, if the state can help us with the landowner, we'll propose trail from the intersection to the bridge. We're gonna propose a pedestrian bridge. So at the very least, if you can get, in this early stage, you can get to the trailhead at 13, you now have access over the bridge in the river safely and to the 392 intersection, which will allow you to get to Kiger, which allows you to get to Pooter Trail on that side and also the north side of Main Street. So I think it solves, we're gonna try to kind of chip away at the larger goal, and because we know we don't have a magic wand to say, here's $5 or $10 million to do it all in one fell swoop. While at the same time, we're working on other pieces like land acquisition or easement acquisition along there to create that route for the folks that live on top of it.
Even if we had a 5 or 10 year plan, this is the proposed route, these are our steps, this is, we're gonna save money every year.
In that big matrix, it's very difficult to read, that is, it is spelled out for us in there. If you read that, I don't know if it's on that specific page, but we are working on exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, because I know it's not gonna happen overnight, but at least let's have a vision and a
Yep,
plan of
absolutely.
how we will accomplish it.
Is that under the Frank State River West section, maybe?
That's in the first,
That's fine, that's fine.
I had the
That's good
same
to hear
question.
though.
I had the same question, because several places in it references, as far as strategic planning, they have some ideas about funding. And so I know you're working on some ideas.
And I think
How are you gonna
we're
pay this?
hoping, our fingers are
Right.
crossed that we're gonna hear positively from the community, not only through the TMP, but the PRC strategic plan, that there's some funding mechanisms that are palatable
Okay.
to the public.
community.
And then once we get that response, one way or the other, then I think we come back to this board and say, you know, we heard from constituents, and these are some steps we think we should take in order to create that funding, hopefully, to pay for a lot of what we got on our list, and more that aren't even on there today.
Another question, on the same chart, there's a number of places where it refers to, under considerations, restrictions, it says, does not allow all desired uses without property owner approval. Talk about that a little bit, and what cases do we need to look at,
So-
eminent domain for the greater good versus individual property rights?
So the Frank State Wildlife Area easement comes with conditions. And the underlying
That was-
property owner has all of those retained rights. And I think what I envision, I think that's a really important point. I think it'll be really advantageous for the town to acquire the Frank State Wildlife easement. But I think it's really important to recognize that that doesn't allow us a free license to do whatever we
Right.
want. We
Okay.
still have to do it
Okay.
with the agreement of the underlying landowner.
Okay.
Again, that's one of those parcels that long-term, hopefully the town could get in a position where we are the holder of that property.
Mhm.
And it does, free us up to do some of those other things. But I think that's real long-range planning, that we can try to position ourselves. And that's really where I see my position, is I should be out developing those relationships, having those conversations, seeing what, I think the Poudre Trail is such a phenomenal example. And you look at this most recent acquisition that Larimer County was successful in getting. They had been talking to that particular property owner for over 10 years. And they were finally told, leave us alone, we don't want to talk about it anymore. And then that same property owner contacted them about 6 months ago and said, we're looking at the future and we'd really like to do this. And so that's how this type of position works, is you develop those relationships and you just open the doors, you express those interests, and you just have dialogue. Whether you want it today or 20 years from now, you just try to position. My job, I envision, is to try to get the town in that position so we can acquire those easements for those long-term trails or open space acquisitions, conservation easements, things like that.
It's gonna have to be built on good partnerships and
Absolutely.
conversation, because I think if you even try to go down an eminent domain path, I'm not sure it could, from a legal standpoint, be that successful. Because it's not like there aren't other options,
Right.
and that's what the property owner, I think, could probably argue, that
Yeah.
do something else, leave my, you don't have to go right through my property. So I think, and anyway, then you have bad blood, and I don't think that's good anyway. Because if you've got folks going back and forth there, and somebody is not happy about that end result, I'm not sure I'd want to be one of those patrons going back and forth there. So I think, and that's what they've been able to achieve to date, right? In all the years they've been doing that, is sometimes you might have to hold out on those conversations. But at the end, some of those properties are turning over too, as the next generation comes in, so.
And just to add to that, a really important point about that conversation is the Larimer County open space tax prohibits acquisition of properties that way.
Does it?
It has to be willing landowners, so.
Okay, anything else?
I have a quick question. For the Larimer, the tax, Larimer County open space, can we accumulate that, or does that have to be spent within a certain?
That's how we accumulated the million
Okay.
that we have earmarked this year for Kite.
Thanks.
Yeah, it just has to be spent in Larimer.
Right.
Just quick, when I look at the French State Wildlife, it's hard to tell the boundaries of that on this drawing, but does it go all the way to Main Street? Is that all part of the wildlife area? even though it's being
The only portions that it goes to Main Street, I think, are west of County Road 13. So,
Okay, so the area being mined right now is not part of
no, it is
it?
not.
Kind of southeast.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay. Well, thank you, Wade.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks for a
Randy.
nice presentation.
Yes.
Future meetings, anything, don't have
No.
anything?
See,
Going
we've
on?
got, our next few meetings are booked up, but, is there anything we can chat about? We've got the 15th is still open, so it's actually kind of nice to have a couple voids in our work session agenda. I feel like we've been going,
Well, one thing, if you, and I don't know if you could have it done in time, but I noticed on your report last week, there was some new conversation with NISP and relooking at what our, what we're gonna have to be paying them. And maybe just kind of an update with some water, I don't know, if he would have it ready by then, but I don't know if there would be an update of anything water related. But I noticed even like in your update, like what does that mean, how much less is it than the anticipated that we don't have to budget for? And how are we looking at that?
okay, yeah, I can check with John and see if we can get something quick, in front of the board.
Okay, that would be great.
And I'm gonna be traveling July 8th for work. It was supposed to be this week, but it got moved to the
You're
8th.
out to the 8th and
I'm
the
out.
15th?
I
You're
will
out
be out the
8th?
8th and the 15th.
So we're down 2 on the 8th, that's a work session?
I'm not gonna come either.
No, that's actually a town board meeting.
Yeah,
Does we have a
board meeting.
quorum?
If we're gonna play hooky, let's do it on the 15th, or we don't have an agenda, or.
So we still have 5, so we still have a quorum.
Asbestos on Friday.
Yeah, so Jill sent out a reminder email right now, I think we have
Who's already responded to Jill?
It's all
I
right.
responded to her, yeah.
I responded.
Paul, do you know who else?
Now, I had not responded because we were supposed to